It is class time already. Yep.
And I had math on my lab.
Oh my goodness, math on your lab. You must be in heaven. Math for you is always a good thing, right?
Where do we put the log?
You keep it. You can just keep that when it's good. Why is this camera not showing up? It is really weird. I don't understand why I don't see it.
None of us got one question wrong on Jeopardy. We just didn't finish one.
It's weird.
I picked
Yes, I saw.
I got the ice pack.
You got the ice pack for what? What'd you earn it for?
This is just.
Oh, I thought they gave it to you because you heard something. I'm like, what'd you earn it for?
I got second on.
Was that Cartersville? Yeah.
Yeah.
So what level were you this year? Is you are 7? Cool. So I don't know then if we'll be at any, I guess it'll depend how they divide them up levels this year. 7's, since they changed all the numbers, 7's still compulsory, right? 7's optional now? Okay. I can't keep it straight now. I know 8, 9. Okay, let's try this one more time. It doesn't want to work.
Bro, I really send me a picture.
I didn't want to fix my hair, so I figured I'd try the hat. See how it works.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
it plays.
that's what I do. all the time.
I think the hat plays.
I don't know why it's being weird, but I'm gonna put it there. Okay, we'll roll.
You guys sent me a picture of Jocko Willink, didn't you?
All right, are we good to go?
Okay, last,
Have you looked at your son all weekend?
I said it.
This is true, right? Right? All right, gang. So we're going to go through our lesson fairly quickly today. I do have some videos embedded, but I'm probably going to put some of them just in the weekly email and whatever, and you guys can look at them on your own, just because one of them's really good and it does a really good job of like working through cladograms, but it's long and I don't want to take up too much time. Although we did get a lot done today with Jeopardy with everybody in lab. So I'll keep it out in time.
Team 1 had the best block.
Ah, yes, team
Except
1.
at the end. You
Wham,
guys
wham,
won.
wham, wham, wham.
Yeah, but you had all the easy questions. Except you took, that's because you took all the hard questions. Yeah, it's not our fault. We wanted to challenge our brain.
Put that one up, the wrong one. All right, so here we go.
You were trying to cheat and look through the book while answering.
So here's our lesson for today, okay? All right, Cole, Alex, hey, we're here. We're gonna wrap up our lesson, all right? Last lesson, right, last lesson. When is your test for Unit 5 due? Monday at 8 a.m., not Tuesday, because Tuesday you're coming in to take midterms. Monday test, keep in mind. So classification, taxonomy, fossil record, and history of life. This is a fun one. Now, this is where we put all the big picture together. We go, okay, we spent all this time now talking about how things evolved, and now how are they related?
2 letters of history italicized.
I don't know. I didn't write it. I stole that. All right, so here's our dude, Carolus Linnaeus. All right, we just call him Carl. Good old Carl. All right, Carl 1730. All right, so here's the thing about this dude. He came up with the original taxonomic system. Much of it is still used, but we have adapted it. If you have parents or grandparents who remember anything about this, they're going to remember what he taught. Okay. I learned total Linnaean system. It has since changed. This is what happens with time. So binomial nomenclature, first of all, we talked about this in our lab today, right? So your binomial nomenclature, the purpose of this here is that you're going to assign each species a 2-part name, right? And it's going to be their genus plus their species. And the point is to organize things into groups that have biological meaning, because that's what we're trying to do. Categorize life by ways that are similar, right? And then over time, Linnaeus's original classification expanded to include 7 hierarchical taxa. So these are backwards from the way you usually do them. You usually start at the top and come down to more specific. If we start with most specific, we're going to kind of do this list backwards. So who remembers the mnemonic for taxonomy? You do?
Dear King Philip came over for great spaghetti.
There you go. Dear King Philip, dopey dippy, whatever you remember. It used to just be King Philip came over for great spaghetti. Why did it change?
Because they added domain.
Because we added domains. Right. Okay. And our big domains are what? Remember?
RKO.
RK and yeah, there we go. Eubacteria or eukarya. Yep. All right. So backwards would be species, genus, then what? What's going to be next?
Family.
Okay.
Family species.
Phylum,
Phylum,
class, order, kingdom, phylum, class.
Order. Class.
There's class, kingdom,
Kingdom. Domain.
phylum, kingdom, and then lastly domain. But this is where Linnaeus left off. Okay. Linnaeus left off with here. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And there are multiple ways to categorize beyond just the Linnaean system. So these are some of Linnaeus's really fun drawings. I love this Andromeda. I don't know what that is. It's interesting. So yes, this is an example of this particular rose. If you go to the least specific, we're going to start in Kingdom Plantae and move our way all the way down. Angiosperms, keep going all the way down until we get down here to our species of rose. Do any of you guys that did biology with me years ago remember what angiosperms are? There was angiosperms and gymnosperms, and we had a little mnemonic for that too. It had to do with Angie and Jim.
Pine cones.
Pine cones was something, yeah. It was Angie likes. Do you remember? Angie liked apples, right? Because she liked flowering trees that make fruit, and Jim liked ice cream cones because gymnosperms are those are your conifers basically, which we'll get into in Q3. So we are going to watch this video because this one is fun and it is worth just all the work you're doing this week for studying. This one is fun to watch. You got to love binomial nomenclature. You can do whatever you want with it.
Until the mid-1700s, the names we used to identify living things were a bit of a mess. At the time, a lot of scientific names were trying to both identify and describe species, and some of them were like 12 words long. In 1753, a Swedish botanist named Carl Linnaeus tried to fix this problem by developing the simpler 2-word system that we still use today. Every species has both a generic name, genus name, followed by its trivial or species name. He argued that it didn't really matter what the name was, as long as every
Sorry, letting Shannon in.
species got a unique label and everybody agreed to use it. And that's why today rules for naming a new species aren't very strict. If you find it, you get to name it. Pretty much anything goes as long as you use the Latin alphabet and the name isn't too offensive. So if you ever happen to discover a new species and you want to name it after your favorite sandwich or Game of Thrones character or your childhood pet, you probably can. But if you're really struggling to come up with your dream species name, here are a few ideas. One way to name a species is by going with a clever translation and maybe a bit of poetic flair, like the salt-loving bacteria whose Latin name means traveler of the void. It earned that name by surviving in outer space for 2 years. In 2009, researchers sent samples of the bacteria to the International Space Station, or more specifically to the outside of the space station. All of the samples were exposed to the vacuum of space. Some of them were totally shielded from the sun's rays, some of them were only partially shielded, and some were completely exposed. The bacteria that got the full blast of the sun's radiation all died, but some of the ones that were partially shielded made it, and almost all of the bacteria that were totally protected survived. Next we have Oxidax muciflorus, aka the bone-eating snot flower, which is exactly what it sounds like. The muciflorus is a pink marine worm that somehow resembles both a frilled flower and something you'd find in a used tissue. These guys live in whale carcasses on the Atlantic Ocean floor, where the females anchor themselves within the bones of the whale's large skeletons. There they secrete a special acid that dissolves the bone so they can suck it in through their skin, since they lack both mouths and gut. And they really do make themselves at home in these bones. They send their flower-like gill plumes out the side of the bone to collect oxygen. They also send out a long tube-like oviduct. Researchers think they use the oviduct to shoot out fertilized eggs that can then disperse through the water. If you're not into descriptive translations, you could try a solid pun, or just wordplay in general. Like how when researchers identified a new genus of small brown and yellow fungus beetles, they dubbed it jelly, after the Latin gelatus, meaning congealed or jelly. This made a kind of sense since the tiny round beetles eat and therefore spend most of their time living on slime mold. The researchers then went on to name 500 species: jelly bean, jelly belly, jelly donut, jelly roll, and jellyfish. Probably just because they could. On the other hand, if you've got a new species waiting for a name, you could always just name it after a celebrity. That's what German entomologist and spider expert Peter Jäger did in 2008 when he identified a new type of Malaysian spider and named it Heteropida David Bowie. Not unlike Aladdin sings, that is big, bright-haired, and fabulous. David Bowies can be 15 to 25 millimeters long, and their whole bodies are covered in yellow, orange, and red hair. They're also one of over 200 species named by Jäger, and not the first inspired by a celebrity. Many of the species Jäger works with are rare, endangered, and easily overlooked. He estimates there may only be around 500 David Bowies left on their island habitat. And he hoped that by giving them a flashy celebrity name, they might pull some headlines of their own and draw public attention to conservation efforts. Plus, there's that whole Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders to Mars thing, too. While some researchers may name a species after a celebrity to celebrate that person's achievements, others may just notice a particular resemblance between their species and the famous ones. In 2011, when curator Brian Lesser began describing a previously unknown species of Australian horsefly in Old New Zealand, he was immediately mesmerized by the fly's spectacular lower abdomen, bedazzled with dense golden hair. It's a glamorous bun, he thought. One might even call it bootylicious. So he named it Scaphia beyonceae, after Queen Bey herself. Golden booty or not, most people don't appreciate the 4,000 plus species of horseflies in this world, probably because their bites really hurt and it's really annoying when one keeps buzzing past your eyeball. But horseflies are actually quite useful citizens of Earth. Adult horseflies are important pollinators. They feed on nectar and move pollen around. Only the females bite, but most of them are anatogenous, which means they can't properly reproduce without first eating a hearty blood snack. And you can't really blame the girl for taking care of herself. I'm pretty sure Beyonce even has some songs about that. Then there's the story of paleontologist David Legg, who saw the claw-like front appendages of a 505 million-year-old lobster-like fossil and immediately thought of Edward Scissorhands. The new genus Kootenai honored both the place where the fossil was found, Kootenai National Park in British Columbia, and referenced the animal's most distinctive feature with chella, the Latin word for claw. And the species name Deppi honored Johnny Depp, the film's shark-featured star. At about 4 centimeters long, Kootenai Deppi was relatively small and probably used its big claws to capture or scavenge for prey along shallow sea bottoms. It's essentially the precursor to the arthropods we have today, like crabs and scorpions, as well as spiders, centipedes, and insects. Now, if celebrities aren't your thing, you could always name a newly found species after your favorite fictional character. Since sciencey people often enjoy science fiction, it probably shouldn't come as a surprise that the Harry Potter, Tolkien, and Star Wars fandoms are already well represented. For example, meet the J.K. Rowling-inspired Anti-Lex Dementor, the cockroach wasp. These wasps have the charming habit of zombifying their prey, like hooded guards of Azkaban suck the souls right out of their victims. Native to Thailand, Dementor wasps stab roaches in the belly, injecting them with a mind-controlling venom that leaves them technically able to move, but unable to control their own bodies. That makes it easy for the wasp to haul them away and chow down, meeting a fate that only the worst Death Eater deserves. In 2007, paleontologists digging in Morocco unearthed a fossilized skull fragment, discovering a new, large, carnivorous dinosaur. The fragment was mostly of the upper skull, but it included an eye socket. They named it Sauromia because, in the words of study leader Andrea Cow, the idea of a predator that is physically known only as its fierce eye reminded me of Sauron. Aren't nerds the best? The fossil suggests the animal was a toothy, two-legged terror, probably as big as a T-Rex, and just as scary as Sauron himself, although without more fossils, it's hard to say for sure. Broad and thick with a distinct lump on its forehead, a Sauromia's skull looks a bit different than other two-legged dinosaurs from that area. Researchers think males may have used their head lumps to compete for ladies with some good old-fashioned headbutting. Now, Sauron's not the only hobbit enemy getting props. There's also the aptly named genus Smog, which contains a group of 8 medium-sized African-girdled lizards. As members of the Chordillidae family, they're noted for their well-armored bodies, roughly scaled tails, and large spines. They are basically mini dragons. Smog species are insectivores, give birth to live young, and are bigger than most members of the taxonomic family. They live in deep and narrow rock crevices, or in one case, tight underground burrows, which makes the name even more appropriate, since Tolkien probably named his dragon Smog after the German word for squeezing through a hole. So many layers of meaning here. And finally, no list of fun names would be complete without a Star Wars reference, and my favorite has got to be Han Solo, not the character. Well, maybe the character, but the actual species. It's a type of trilobite, a very old, fossilized group of extinct marine arthropods, and its official scientific name is just straight up Han Solo. Researcher Samuel Turvey does admit that his friends dared him to name something after a Star Wars character, but the name is actually very clever. For one thing, the fossil was discovered in the Hunan province of China, and the Han people are a large Chinese ethnic group. The animal also happens to be the only known member of its family, hence the Solo. Trilobites were also diverse, widely distributed, and if you can find one, they're often nearly as well preserved as Harrison Ford and Carbon. These are just a few examples So if you ever have the opportunity to name a species of your own, don't be afraid to get creative. Thanks for watching this SciShow List Show brought to you by our patrons on Patreon. If you want to help support this
So,
show,
very
go to
interesting.
patreon.com/scishow, and don't forget to go to
Some of them are just great, right? People really have fun. Yes.
So basically, his friend was like, I dare you to make a Star Wars reference. And he's like, Han, Solo, boom.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm done now. Thank you. I'm done.
I'm done.
I'm done
I
now.
go to sleep now for the first time in days. Let's go.
So use of scientific names must have two characteristics. It must refer to only one species, and everybody uses the name, which is why scientific names are so good compared to common names. Whatever we call something here is not what you call it in Germany or whatever. So, and not even, I mean, shoot, look at lightning bugs and fireflies. That's a United States debate. Okay. We haven't even left the language of the country. We're already arguing about stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a European debate too.
No, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. So you guys probably saw this one in your homework. That was easy. That's what we just did. And how does the Linnaeus system of classification help to establish unity of life? Its overall similarities and characteristics. But what Linnaeus was lacking, bless you, was the information we have now with DNA. He didn't have any of that, right? Didn't even know about it. So this is where things get different. This is where we start to change stuff. So phylogenetic systems. Okay, so this is where we are classifying things in an evolutionary way. And we're looking specifically at evolutionary descent rather than overall similarities and differences. So Linnaeus really was looking at similarities and differences, whereas when we're getting into phylogenetics, we're talking more about evolutionary descent. So cladograms. So cladograms were in your review. There may be a cladogram question on your test, on your midterm. So cladogram here is, it's going to show where lineage lines break off. So it's not like a straight family, it's more like a straight family tree. There's all these, you've seen these tree of life things. Some of them go every which way. This one shows you how things are related and aren't related, but where their common ancestors were. So in general, the more derived genetic characters two species share, the more recently they share a common ancestor. So a derived character is a specific thing we can note that is shared, and we can break it down to genetic derived characters. So remember last week we talked a little bit about like ticks, mutations and ticks and clocks and all that kind of business. So what we're talking about is, yeah, I know that the time went out, but I said don't focus too much on it. But basically, we can trace back genetic lines of evolution by seeing how often mutations occur, what rate at which they occur. That helps us establish a timeline. And then we can look and see, which species had the mutations, which, when did this gene appear for the first time? And who else has this gene? Who else has this gene and now has other genes that this line doesn't have? And it just is a way of, so the derived character itself is the specific thing you're looking at. In this case, usually a gene or a combination of genes. So if you look at it this way, this is a great example, and I'll go over it briefly, but the video that we're going to skip because it's longer, the video that we're going to skip, and if we have time, we'll come back to it, goes into it really deeply and explains it very well. So you have a monophyletic group. That's a group of organisms that includes an ancestral species and its entire descendant species. So we call this also a clade. So this is your example of a clade. Okay, so all the organisms in this clade, all right, have one common ancestor. You could also put everything in this diagram in a monophyletic group because they're all branching from whatever is down here. Okay, whatever is down here eventually evolves into all these different things. So new world monkeys, old world monkeys, apes, humans, genetically speaking, here is our clade. Okay, well, right here, we have tarsiers that break off. And then lemurs are down here and lorises are up here. Have you seen a loris? If we have time, I'll show you a loris. Oh yes, slow loris. They are so cute, but they have like poisonous armpits. It's really weird. They are the cutest things on the planet. I'll have to find, there's a YouTube video. I'll have to try to remember to share it, but there's a YouTube video of they're called slow loris, and he's eating a little rice ball. And he eats the little rice ball. He looks like a little tiny person. They have these big eyes and they're very slow moving, but they can produce like this toxin, and they can like under their armpits that they can lick. And then when they lick you, or bite you, they pass it on. It's gross, but they're really kind of cool. Anyway, so we're looking at a primate group right here. This is obviously primates. So then you have this paraphyletic group. Okay, so that's a group of organisms that consist of an ancestral species and some of its descendant species. So you could put all these guys together. So tarsiers, lorises, and lemurs, you can say are all part of the same paraphylate or paraphyletic group. But lorises and lemurs do not come from the same, or lorises do not come from the same ancestral species as tarsiers, which puts them in a polyphyletic group right here. So this is your taxon that shows that they lack a common ancestor. So basically, whatever this primate was, somewhere here, lemurs branched off and lorises branched off from lemurs, but tarsiers, while they share the same ancestor as lorises and lemurs, lorises and tarsiers do not share a common ancestor. Does that make sense? It's kind of this graphic's pretty good. And that's why the video is really great. If we have time, we'll toss it in, but it's this dude again. Skip over him. All right. So how did Darwin's theory of evolution change the way biologists thought about classification categories? What do we have? Who has their answers out? You're getting them good. And if y'all have been wondering how I count credit for this, it's basically whether or not you seem to have a clue what's going on. Because if you seem to have a clue what's going on, I'm like, you probably did their work. Right? They probably filled in some things. Michael is looking for his answers. Anybody know? And can anybody just...
What is the question?
So it's, how did Darwin's theory of evolution change the way biologists thought about classification categories?
It probably enlightened them to cladograms.
Cladogram, the idea, yeah. So we now group organism by lines of evolutionary descent, right? Not just similarities. So Darwin was the one who brought up this whole concept of there was a common ancestor and then nature selected for certain characteristics and we had speciation.
They're not
So-
grouping dolphins and fish together.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah, and whales and all those. So let's throw whales with fish and no, let's not, right? So it's not just similarities. Now we're looking specifically at evolutionary descent. All right, so here's a cladogram for you here. So according to this figure, which species is going to be most closely related to that red panda here, this guy?
Raccoon.
The raccoons, right? But he's called a panda. He's called a panda.
And he looks a bit like a panda.
Have you ever seen red pandas? They have them at the zoo. They're not all that big, right? They are cute, right? So although giant pandas and raccoons share some distinct similarities, they're in different clades. What type of evidence do you think was used to construct this diagram? So what would you need?
Size is one difference. Their facial structure is different too. Their snout is different. It's much sharper
Okay.
than a panda bear.
How about genetics? Would we be using genetics?
Genetics, bone, body structure.
Yeah. So giant pandas and raccoons are definitely related, but their common ancestor is way down here, which means that your raccoon and your bear are just as equally related as your giant panda and your red panda, right? Because here's your common ancestor.
Is it just me or do the red pandas, raccoons, and bears look alike, but the giant pandas don't?
I don't know, maybe
Sort
a little bit. Yeah.
of.
Giant pandas have a softer snout. I mean,
I saw a reel the other day, just showed up in my feed, but it was this, I don't know what people are doing. I think they're trying to get eaten alive, but it was a giant panda. You know how they sit there? They sit up like people, right? And they're like these big lumbery things. And there was a human being in, like, he had on clothes, but he had a whole mask, like the whole latex mask that goes over your whole head. And it was a panda head. And he was laying on his back with this, like his feet, his knees bent and his hands bent. And he was looking at, and the panda's looking at him, and he pulled the mask off, and the panda went like, and it was crazy. I thought, that thing is gonna eat your face. What are you doing? It was bizarre.
Better have recorded that. But
What is going on? What is wrong with people? Anyway, it was weird because that panda, like, you ever seen the ones where people do, Michael, you may have seen them, where they do card tricks with the apes at the glass windows at the zoo,
Yeah.
and they clearly get it because they're like, this panda freaked out. So although giant pandas and raccoons share some distinct anomalies, they are in different clades. So that's what we said. We can use DNA evidence is definitely going to be your best.
And anatomical similarities, not anomalies.
What did I read? Oh, anatomical. Yes, sorry. So biologists had previously classified giant pandas together with raccoons and red pandas. So what did DNA analysis reveal about giant pandas and bears?
Pandas are
That they're
bears.
gonna be, yep, giant pandas and bears share more recent ancestor than giant pandas and raccoons. All right, so now let's look at what we now consider our tree of life, which is way, way, way more complicated than the nice linear system Linnaeus had. Isn't it nice that linear and Linnaeus kind of sound like the same thing? All right, so this guy right here at the top, you see this 5 kingdom system?
Yeah.
All right, if you have parents, grandparents, whatever, anybody that learned this in school, this is what they learned. They learned the 5. Monera, Protista, Plantae, Fungi, and Amelia. Real easy. Bling, 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 bling. I could spit them all out. This is what I learned. Now we've added domain, right, above that. So this was your 5 kingdom in your kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And there are other ways. There's a 6 way. There's a 3 way. There's an 8 way. These are all get complicated, but what we're looking at most of all is if you remember this 5 with the domain above it, that's probably going to be the simplest and the most suitable for this class.
I think I remember when I was young, learned the 5 kingdoms.
Yep. A lot of us did. It's only fairly recently that we added domain and that we changed kingdoms around, and we had eubacteria and archaebacteria. So now we're doing eubacteria and archaebacteria, and these are going to fall into and eubacteria, archaebacteria, and protists are going to fall into what eubacteria, archaebacteria, and protists, and these are going to fall, into your prokaryotes, and then these are going to fall into eukarya. You can see how this says eukarya, so this is obviously prokarya here. So lots of different ways to categorize it. And here's your commonalities and differences. You've got your single-celled, your multi-celled, a little of both. These are all things that went into the process of categorizing. Now, everybody loves David Attenborough.
I love him.
Right? Who doesn't love David Attenborough? So this is a really great this is a quick one. So we are going to do it. It's a quick tree of life video, but I really like it. It's not too long. It's worth watching. If he'll come on, Dave. Come on, Dave. He always makes you feel smarter. You know, I don't know what that is about British people.
Professor Dewey.
Oh my gosh, Professor Dave's my man.
50 years after the publication of Darwin's revolutionary book, modern genetics has confirmed its fundamental truth. All life is related. And it enables us to construct with confidence.
I'm gonna run the restroom real quick. You guys are good.
That represents the history of life. It began in the sea some 3,000 million years ago. Complex chemical molecules began to come together to form microscopic blobs, cells. These are the seeds from which the tree of life developed. They were able to split, replicating themselves as bacteria do. And as time passed, they diversified into different groups. Some remained attached to one another so that they formed chains. We know them today as algae. Others formed hollow balls which collapsed upon themselves, creating a body with an internal cavity. They were the first multi-celled organisms. Sponges are the direct descendants. As more variations appeared, the tree of life grew and became more diverse. Some organisms became more mobile and developed a mouth that opened into a gut. Others had bodies stiffened by an internal rod. They, understandably, developed scent organs around their front end. A related group had bodies that were divided into segments with little projections on either side that helped them to move around on the sea floor. Some of these segmented creatures developed hard protective skins which gave their bodies some rigidity. So now the seas were filled with a great variety of animals. And then around 450 million years ago, some of these armored creatures crawled up out of the water, and ventured onto land. Here, tree of life branched into a multitude of different species that exploited this new environment in all kinds of ways. One group of them developed elongated
Oh,
flaps
Michael,
in their
shush.
backs, which over many generations eventually developed into wings. The insects. Life moved into the air and diversified into mirrors. Meanwhile, back in the seas, those creatures with a stiffening rod in their bodies had strengthened it by encasing it in bone. A skull with a hinged jaw that could grab and hold up the prey. They grew bigger and developed fins with quick muscles that enabled them to swim with speed and power. And so fish now dominated the waters of the world. One group of them developed the ability to gulp air from the water surface. Their fleshy fins became weight-supporting legs, and 375 million years ago, a few of these backbone creatures followed the insects onto the land. They were amphibians with wet skins, and they had to return to water to lay their eggs. But some of their descendants evolved dry, scaly skins and broke their link with water by laying eggs with watertight shells. These creatures, the reptiles, were the ancestors of today's tortoises, snakes, lizards, and crocodiles. And of course, they included the group that back then came to dominate the land, the dinosaurs. But 65 million years ago, a great disaster overtook the Earth. Whatever its cause, a great proportion of animals were extinct. All the dinosaurs disappeared except for one branch, whose scales had become modified into feathers. They were the birds. While they spread through the skies, a small, seemingly insignificant group of survivors began to increase in numbers on the ground beneath. These creatures differed from their competitors in that their bodies were warm and insulated with coats of fur. They were the first mammals. With much of the land left vacant after the Great Catastrophe, they now had their chance. Their warm, insulated bodies enabled them to be active at all times, at night, as well as during the day, and in all places, from the Arctic to the tropics, in water as well as on land, on grassy plains and up in the trees. Today, we and the rest of the mammals share the world with the descendants of those other great animal groups that have evolved on this planet: birds, reptiles, with insects, and with fish. And even with those simplest of all living organisms that first appeared over 3,000 million years ago, the bacteria.
Very, very cute. Yes, sir.
It sounds like they get to watch all of them.
Oh, I'll share them they'll be in the email, so you can always watch them all.
That is just so good.
So here are the answers for this one, if you had it in your notes. So your domains are, you got your bacteria, archaea, eubacteria, your eukarya, sorry. I don't know, he's Aussie, he's always licking something.
My dog name is Aussie. He was a
Oh, yeah?
shepherd. You have to give him a lick or something.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, they're a lot of energy too. All right, so the fossil record. So here's another way we categorize. Everybody's awake, right? Oh, wait. All right, good. Here we go. I'm gonna be sending out a list of New Year's resolutions. Awake will be one of them. Deodorant is gonna be on it. A couple things. All right, fossil record. So now, for those of you who were around for Earth Science, you probably remember we talked about fossil dating in that class as well. So if we're talking about relative, anything being relative to anything else, like the example I used in the juniors class was is a $500,000 house expensive? Well, that's relative to where you live. If you live in the middle of Iowa, that's ridiculously expensive. If you live around here, it's probably a good bit pricey. If you live in San Francisco, that's a steal, man. So everything is relative. So that means you have to have something to compare. So when we're talking about relative dating with fossils, we're talking about comparing them to other fossils, typically based in rock layers, with our concept being that you've got your newest layers on the top, your oldest layers on the bottom. And that can be pretty accurate. We can do pretty well with that. And then also we divide, radiometric dating, is going to be what is our most specific. So if we're using our chemistry here and radioactive decay, our radiometric dating is going to be super, super, super accurate. And those of you that were around for chemistry last year, remember how that works. And basically you can get it narrowed down. Yep, you can get it narrowed down pretty darn accurately. It's impressive. And also we divide geologic time into different chunks, kind of like we divide our day into hours, minutes, and seconds. We divide Earth's time into eons, eras, and periods. And then we've had all kinds of changes to the planet throughout history, right? We've got mountains and plate tectonics and oceans that move and rivers that erode and all that kind of stuff. So we have to consider all those things when we're trying to look at how ancient organisms may or may not be related, which came first, which came second. Yeah.
On that picture, why was there a Mississippian and a Pennsylvanian?
Yep, those are actually, they're actually divisions of time. It's kind of funny. I like it. This is a fast one, but this one is worth watching. Now, this one, you can find similar ones that do the history of the Earth, the whole Earth. This does just life on Earth. So notice that it's a 24-hour clock, and it's going to make an analogy for life on Earth in a 24-hour clock. Notice it doesn't start till 4.
Like a quarter millisecond.
Yeah, something very tiny. So it starts at 4 a.m. and that's because midnight to 4 a.m. we don't have life yet. Okay, this one's very fast, but it's really worth watching because it gives you great perspective.
Life, with an estimated 3.8 billion years of existence and evolution on Earth, it's an odd thing indeed. So how did we get here? And what would the first 4.5 billion year timeline look like compressed into a normal day of 24 hours? The story begins early in the morning, around 4 a.m., with the rise of the first simple single-celled organisms. However, these organisms are destined to spend quite some time alone. At 1 p.m., a simple cell engulfs another, creating a symbiotic relationship and the first eukaryotic cells, or cells with internal organs. At 6:30 p.m., these cells begin to form colonies, and thus the first multicellular life develops. But it isn't until 8:30 p.m. that sea plants appear, and 20 minutes later, we suddenly see animal life erupt in an explosion of inventiveness. Jellyfish, the first true vertebrates, trilobites. Incredible diversification begins to take place. And just before 10 p.m., plants begin to appear on land, followed by land mammals. By 1024, the Earth is covered in carboniferous forests, and the first winged insects appear. Many reptiles dominate the land with less than an hour left, but a mass extinction event allows dinosaurs to storm the sea and remain until 11:41 p.m., when they too suddenly vanish. And so begins the age of man. In the last few minutes, apes split from the old world monkeys, and with only 1 minute and 17 seconds left before midnight, humans emerge. All of the recorded human history fits within a few seconds, an individual life lasting barely an instant, all a culmination of 3.8 billion years of life. This ASAP Science video was made possible by
I
the
love
support
that
of
one for
Audible.com.
perspective. That's
With their
really
help,
good
we're
for
able to-
perspective. That's crazy. It just shows you how new we are. And it really shows you how new, when it talks about the last, minute and 18 seconds as humans, but human history was only the last couple seconds entirely.
Yeah.
So when people talk about history, keep that in mind. When people talk about, oh, that hasn't happened, but once in history, it won't happen again. It's like history, man. History is nothing. Like our history that we know is nothing. It's blink of an eye. So the
3 seconds, 2 seconds.
less, human history.
Maybe we've had
Yeah.
global warming like 70 times.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, who knows, right? You're talking about recorded human history is blink of an eye, blink of an eye. So there's this geologic timescale. All right, patterns and processes of evolution. All right, so speciation and extinction. So if the rate of speciation in a clade,
Is that a Swiss Army beak?
it's great, isn't it? If the rate of speciation in a clade is equal to or greater than the rate of extinction, the clade will continue to exist. If the rate of extinction in a clade is greater than the rate of speciation, it will become extinct. Duh. It makes sense, right? Okay. So evidence shows that evolution has often proceeded at times at different rates for different organisms at different times over a long period of history. So you have two important patterns in macro evolution. You have what's called adaptive radiation and convergent evolution. This is adaptive radiation here at the top, convergent evolution at the bottom. So adaptive radiation occurs when you've got a single species or a small group of species that evolves over a short time into different forms that live in different ways. So this is kind of like what Darwin was seeing, right? Like he's seeing all these finches with slightly different beaks that are, and tortoises with different shaped shells, but they were very specific to their very specific environment. Convergent evolution occurs when unrelated organisms evolve into similar forms. And the relationship between two co-evolving organisms often becomes so specific that neither organism can survive without the other. Thus, an evolutionary change in one organism is usually followed by a change in another organism. So if you look at these dudes here, imagine for a minute you have just this penguin, all right, and then you have, a puffin, sorry. You're right, let's imagine he's a penguin, okay, and a leopard seal. All right, penguins and leopard seals, one's a mammal, one's a bird. They have an analogous structure, right? They both move through fluid. One of them has like arms, the other has wings, basically, that have been adapted specifically for moving through that fluid. But if those penguins disappear, it's going to cause a problem for the leopard seals because they're eating them, right? That kind of thing. All right, so you have to keep that sort of thing in mind. Whereas adaptive radiation, this is much more like we said, like what Darwin saw. So you can almost see a parallel here between analogous and homologous, where you're talking about structure versus function, right? So we'll get to that in a minute when we look at homologous and analogous in our review. But keep that in mind. So large scale are macro evolutionary patterns. And then obviously a mass extinction is when, like, an asteroid hits the earth or whatever. And the rate of speciation in a clade must be equal or greater than, we did that. And immediately after mass extinction, biodiversity is dramatically reduced because not as many organisms are left.
If everything's dead, it's not very diverse.
This is true.
If only one thing was able to survive.
Yeah, right. So Earth's early history. So Earth's early atmosphere, you guys probably remember this if anybody that did chemistry or earth science, we went over this. So early atmosphere contained little or no oxygen, was principally composed of carbon dioxide, water vapor, nitrogen, and before that it was other stuff too. Lesser amounts of carbon monoxide, hydrogen sulfide, hydrogen cyanide, it would not have been a place you could survive, right? So Miller and Ulrey were these dudes that their experiment suggested how mixtures of the organic compounds necessary for life could have arisen from simpler compounds on a primitive Earth. So they talk about the RNA world. So the RNA world is a hypothesis that proposes that RNA existed by itself before DNA, which kind of makes sense because it's single-stranded, right? It's not double-stranded. And that in an RNA-based system, there are steps that could have led to the development of DNA, and then that could have directed protein synthesis. So these are when you start talking about things like what do they talk about it being like a soup, right? Like a chemical soup, and somehow something happened. This is where you get into that, what could possibly have happened and how could it possibly have happened? And then there's this endosymbiotic theory that proposes that a symbiotic relationship evolved over time between primitive eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells, and the development of sexual reproduction sped up the evolutionary change. And that didn't happen until many years down the road. So the idea is, and when we talked about this a little bit with cells, but at the very beginning of Q3, we're going to talk about simple protists. And do you know how amoebas eat? You ever seen how amoebas eat? Yeah, phagocytosis, they engulf things. You actually have immune cells in your body that do the same thing. They like They have these little pseudopods, right? These little feet, and they kind of like, yeah, and they suck it in, make a little vacuole. There are theories that that's how you got your first eukaryotic cell in the first place, is like one cell engulfed another cell, and then you have kind of like a cell inside of a cell, which sort of becomes like a membrane-bound nucleus inside of a cell. And that's how you go from prokaryotic to eukaryotic. These are all the theories of how we got there. None of us were there, so we don't know because we weren't there. So here's another quick one. I got a couple quick ones today because they're fun. These 4-minute ones are pretty fast and they're worth it because they're good.
Over 99% of the animal species that have ever lived are now extinct. And sometimes an event occurs causing changes so drastic that most species are completely wiped out within a short period of time. So here are the 5 most incredible mass extinctions ever to occur, and a look at whether the 6th might be happening right now.
Oh no.
440 million years ago was the Ordovician extinction. At that time, most creatures swam or crawled in shallow seas. As newly created volcanic rock was worn down by water and wind, it reacted with carbon dioxide and absorbed it. As a result, carbon dioxide levels dropped, temperatures fell, and water got locked away as ice. This caused ocean levels to drop and shallow seas to drain, and after several cycles of growing and shrinking glaciers, about 86% of species were lost forever. Then, over millions of years, the oceans slowly repopulated with fish, and the land was colonized by early plants. These plants were then eaten by the first crawling and flying insects. Then, 374 million years ago, these new plants contributed to the next mass extinction. The plants absorbed enough carbon dioxide to create another round of global cooling. They changed soil, causing nutrients to wash into the ocean, creating enormous amounts of algae, which sucked up oxygen. More than half of the ocean species essentially choked to death. Although somewhere in the world, a small family of fish with foot-like fins and lungs managed to scrape by. Over the next 100 million years, these creatures would evolve into amphibians, reptiles, and nearly all modern land animals. 250 million years ago is the Permian extinction, the single worst mass extinction in history. 70% of life on land and over 95% of life in the oceans was wiped out. Billions of tons of volcanic gases destroyed the ozone layer, and the average ocean temperature hit 40 degrees Celsius, which is hotter than most hot tubs. Acid rain fell all over the planet, devastating life on land. Life had only 50 million years to recover until the 4th mass extinction came. At this time, early small dinosaurs roamed the land. A huge volcanic rift opened in the middle of the planet, eventually splitting the Americas from Europe and Africa and forming the Atlantic Ocean. The volcano spewed out carbon dioxide, increasing temperatures and killing about 80% of the species around at that time. Yet in this newly emptied world, dinosaurs did extremely well, and during the next 135 million years, they grew to become some of the largest land animals the world has ever seen. But all good things must come to an end. Many scientists believe that the extinction of dinosaurs was caused by an asteroid the size of a small town crashing into what is now Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. The impact shot millions of tons of dust into the atmosphere, blocking out sunlight and spelling an end to all large dinosaurs. The small ones that survived evolved into birds. The world was now primed for a small, scuffling rat-like creature, the ancestor of all modern mammals. Within 50 million years, its descendants from wildebeests and whales, horses, and us humans have diversified and grown to dominate nearly every available environment on Earth. So where does that leave us now, 65 million years later? Well, human dominance of Earth has led to big changes too, except the changes of today are happening over decades, not millennia. Carbon dioxide levels implicated in so many of the past extinctions have climbed at least 25% in just the last 50 years, almost no time in geological terms. In addition to climate change, we've exterminated hundreds of species by hunting, fishing, habitat destruction, and pollution. It's been estimated that the current species extinction rates are between 100 and 1,000 times higher than the natural background rate, and that if all the species that are currently threatened by declining populations actually do go extinct, we may reach the level of a true mass extinction in just a few hundred years. And while all the mass extinctions of the past have had some survivors, it's worth remembering that the creatures at the top of the food chain are usually hit the hardest. We may just be setting the stage for history to repeat itself and for some small, unexpected organism to replace us as the planet's dominant form of life. Curious about the coolest animals that existed during these mass
Hokies, go
extinctions? Check out our new
Hokies!
video, 5 insane
Sorry.
creatures we wish.
He's got his Hokie shirt on, so I have to yell for that. Anyway.
That last little picture feature, you said that.
The dragonfly is going to take over the world.
Grass eats dragonflies.
I don't know, man. So, yes.
Yes. did you know that all
Proteinoid
rats actually turn
microspheres. This is, we're back to our organic
Just like
soup
that.
stuff.
It's
There you
not.
go.
Dragonflies don't eat grass. Grass eats dragonflies.
There you
Dragonflies just eat
Tiny bubbles for organic. This is all, but you can all go over this. I'll leave this for you. Experiment up. So why do scientists think that RNA may have evolved before DNA? Experiment shows small sequences of RNA could have formed and replicated on their own in conditions of early Earth. All right,
How
so,
did they get from the dinosaurs to the rat? That's what I don't.
so the idea is that after the mass extinction, your big asteroid making your Gulf of Mexico, that the small dinosaurs were the ones that remain.
Yeah.
And then you have your link dinosaurs, like your Archaeopteryx, which looks sort of like a dinosaur, sort of like a bird. And that scales over time, modified into feathers, and feathers over time modified into hairs. And there's obviously going to be a big jump when you go to, well, when you go from like amphibian eggs to reptile eggs, you get both shells that are impermeable to losing water, but they're also amniotic. And then when you go from amniotic eggs to placental mammals, that's a big difference too. So when next quarter, we're basically going to go through our major groups of life, and we'll talk about kind of how, more specifically, how you get from one to the next, what the differences are, and sort of like how, like just the differences within that group itself, like the differences within mammals, and we'll get real specific. And I'll put your unit 5, these are your unit 5 test topics. When's your unit 5 test due? Monday, 8 a.m. You're gonna have to find adaptation and natural selection, analogous versus homologous, which we're gonna go over again in a minute when we go over midterm review. Compare, contrast selective breeding, natural selection. Vestigial structures in humans. What's the most obvious one? What's the first thing you think of when you think of a vestigial structure? That means tailbone's a good one. Yep. Tailbone, appendix, wisdom teeth. Yeah. Goosebumps. That thing in your hand, right? Oh yeah, the little eye thing. All those things. Yep.
I think we should bring back
Yep.
that eye thing.
I
That's
really
also-
do
Yep.
think we should.
Yeah.
I'm tired of sitting on sunglasses and I'm playing that.
Can you imagine winking?
I don't. that's what-
Winking horizontally.
You know, like a single wink.
Wink.
Super creepy. Imagine 2 winks.
2 winks means you really like her. So anyway.
You're like, no one
Yep.
will notice.
So sexual reproduction and genetic variation, why those things go hand in hand. Also, you're gonna have to define evolution, obviously, because it's the topic of all of Unit 5. Methods for determining evolutionary phylogeny. Remember, this is, of course, we're looking at things like similar structures, blah, 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 but DNA is your big one. DNA is your big one. Occurrence of mutations, timelines, things like that. Binomial nomenclature, what is it? You already know what it is, you know. Tortoise influence on Darwin. If you don't remember, go back and look specifically on what it was about the tortoises that made him start thinking the way he was thinking. Lamarck's problem. What was Lamarck's problem? What was his deal?
He was wrong.
He was very wrong. What was he wrong about?
He was wrong that use and disuse changes the
Right.
fitness.
But he was the first, but why is it still essential? Why did what influenced Darwin? Do you remember what it was about him that influenced Darwin?
The fact that species can change and grow.
Yeah, the fact that things can change and that maybe things are getting passed along somehow. Right. So that's still important. Yeah, remember the Lamarck memes are the best. I love the Lamarck memes. Polygenic traits. What's an example of a polygenic trait? Remember? These are the ones that occur on a spectrum. Height, right. More than one gene is involved. Height, skin color, things like that. Stabilizing selection. Do you remember stabilizing selection? This is when you have your bell curve of, like, say, for example, average height. All right, because you have a spectrum. Your stabilizing selection puts it right in the middle because that's the most stable. These outliers over here and outliers over here are usually not quite as well adapted. So it's better to be kind of right in the middle. Also, genetic drift. Remember, that's when you've got a change within your gene pool. Lots of things can cause genetic drift. Remember, we talked about there being barriers, isolation, reproductive isolation that creates speciation. But you can also have genetic drift occur because suddenly some allele is now way more popular than it used to be. Oop, that's on there twice. Don't know why. Ignore that. Linean hierarchy. So that's our dear or dippy or dopey or whatever you want. King Philip came over for great spaghetti. Linean hierarchy. Eukaryotic kingdoms. Okay, now if you get out of the domains and you're back into eukaryotic kingdoms, what are they? So now there's no longer 5 because Monera used to be, that was the one that used to cover all the prokaryotic organisms. So now we're down to 4. What are our eukaryotic domains? 4 kingdoms, sorry, 4 big ones.
Animalia.
Yep.
Plantae.
Yep. Animalia, Plantae.
Fungi.
Fungi, yep. This is the other one. Protista. Those are your typically single-celled, but they're eukaryotic. Parameciums, amoebas, euglenas. Those are the first things we're going to be looking at when you come back from Christmas is protists, okay? And then lastly, gene duplication. How does that happen? How does remember we talked about how sometimes you'll get 2 copies of a gene on a chromosome now all of a sudden. It happens during meiosis, during crossing over. And sometimes you just end up with 2 copies. Yeah, it's a mistake, right? It's a whoops, we didn't mean to do that. All right, so again, I'll post this like I always do as a JPEG so you can come back and look at it. We got 20 minutes left. I want to go over the rest of your midterm review, okay? I want to make sure that we cover it. Now I will say while I'm moving along here that our next quarter, like I said, we're going to go over all of these individual kingdoms basically, and then break them down into phylum and whatnot. We're going to cover our major groups of organisms. I don't know who that is. Do I care? Let me make sure it's not somebody dropping off something I have to sign for. Okay, yeah, I don't care if they ring for a package, but sometimes they'll stand there for 30 seconds and then run away with something I need. And it's like, do they do that for y'all? They ring the doorbell and you don't get there fast enough and they steal your package and take it back with them. And they're like, we'll try tomorrow.
We never have to sign for that.
I'm not supposed to, but there are some things like we have some expensive medications and stuff that finally we got that fixed.
There's one time where this one package came to our door 3 times.
Uh-huh.
They knocked the first time, didn't knock the second time.
Yeah.
And then they're like, hey, we couldn't find you.
Yeah.
'cause-"
I got the one the other day where they said we tried to deliver your package and no one was there. And I'm like, really? How come you're not on my Ring camera? Either of them, not the driveway, not the front door. Where'd you try to deliver this exactly? All right, so let's go over, let's go over our midterm review. All right, so these are the non-Jeopardy questions. These are the ones that I can't quite stick in a Jeopardy format. Now, and you'll probably want to have your eyes open for a quick second because I'm going to give you a very quick second glance, and I mean glance. This is just, for an idea so you have a clue what's going on in your life next week. So I like to grade fast because I like to give you report cards before you leave if it's at all possible. So I have this sort of thing going on. Oh, boom, your questions, and I can just stick this right on top of your midterm, which are already printed, by the way. All of them over there. So there's all your Q3 stuff. When can I take it now? He says. So when I say you have 34 multiple choice, that's what I mean.
When you watch
And when I say you have 8 diagramming or labeling, I'm talking about, things like this. See, there's, oh my goodness. Yep, there's things on there. And then when I say you've got short answers or short essays, anything like this, you got little, woo, okay. And then, no, but see these are great because I can take this back and read your whole answer and then slap the correct one down on top of it. So like if somebody is helping me grade, it's really awesome. And there's some diagrams. Oh my goodness, diagrams went by very fast. Did you see that? And then there's extra credit. Oh my goodness, extra credit questions. Extra credit questions that go by really fast. That you might want to just look over stuff, just study.
You didn't say anything.
I made sure it waved by Shannon's face. So
We'll go back.
Shannon's gonna go back and pause.
That's my-
Pause. I'll be doing it. It'll be hilarious. I'll get so many of you. I'll get more views on this particular lesson than any other YouTube lesson. It'll be like 22 views. Oh my gosh. We all
Get that one picture of
Mhm.
each one.
That's
and
it.
questions.
I'm gonna get
Yeah,
custom.
well,
Blow it up,
So,
memorize
yeah,
the
you
answers.
gave.
everything on here is going to fall. Yeah. Every topic is in the review, either here or in Jeopardy.
Even the extra credits.
So even the extra credits, but some of them, there's no way for me to phrase it for you the way it's asked. In particular, your multi-step,
Yeah.
you're gonna have to understand that concept to work through that. Okay. So, and where it says short essay, that's like, give me at least 3 sentences. Short answer, you don't even have to make a complete sentence, but I mean, it's great if you do, but you don't have to. But I mean, yeah, if you're doing like the short essay one, give me a couple sentences. And you know what the short essay ones, they're the same type of ones. So this one, you guys know?
Yeah.
You already did this, right? That was
No, it's
one,
not, yeah.
because we did it back.
Yeah, you messed it up.
Yeah, it's different here and in Jeopardy. In Jeopardy, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind.
1 gram is not equal to 1 kilogram.
Wait.
Yeah,
wait,
it's supposed to be-
1 gram.
This one is, but this one,
1 gram.
yeah, I didn't change the second one. That's what I need to do. Let me fix the second one. And I'm gonna go over these right after you guys leave. And I'm gonna make sure some of these, like right now, if you click on them, it just gives you all the answers. But I'm gonna make sure that it's set up so that it gives you like one at a time.
All of them.
Okay, so, all right, the statement, the mouse weighs 7 grams is an example of what?
A factual.
Observation.
It's an observation, says James, and that's correct. It is because you're using your senses. Now, let me ask you this. If you knew from previous knowledge that mice tend to weigh 9 grams, what does this mean about the 7-gram mouse?
You can infer that it is.
You could
small.
infer that he is small. Your inference involves information you already have. Your observation is using your senses to
You could say
get it.
Maybe a mouse. So you could say.
You could say something's wrong with this mouse. He's underfed, he's underweight, he's whatever. Okay, so taking advantage of naturally occurring variations in organisms to pass wanted traits onto offspring, what do we call this?
Selective breeding.
Yep, selective breeding. Okay, now think about selective breeding and natural selection and think about how they are the same and different. Remember I just mentioned that for your midterms, right? So and we talked about it a little bit, it came through in the Jeopardy too, right? So there's always a selector, and in nature, it's nature, and in selective breeding, it's the humans, right? All right, you guys know this one, right?
Yeah.
So what's your independent variable?
What you change?
And what's your dependent variable? And what's your control variable? Right. Every test you ever take from me, midterm, final, no matter the discipline, always will be there. Never forget it. Also remember, in some classes, they're gonna refer to this one as manipulated variable and this one as, no, what do they call it? The chemistry book called it something different. It was manipulated variable and now I'm losing it. But anyway, control is always control. But I like independent and dependent. Those are my preferred terminology. All right, now here's your transcription translation. You guys did fine with this during Jeopardy. So remember that your transcription is when you are taking your information from your DNA, building your RNA, right? You're transcribing, right? And then your RNA, you're going to get translation when you build your proteins. And where does translation take place?
On ribosome.
In the ribosomes, right? And what do in translation, you got these little, remember they go in little chunks of 3 codons, ching, 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 ching. They come in little chunks of 3, and that's going to form one what? One amino acid, and then a series of amino acids form your polypeptide chain that forms your protein, right? Right.
How many polypeptide chains in a protein?
I think it depends greatly. Yeah. All right. This is the one to remember. What is this? What am I looking at? What is this? Succession. Right. You've got your primary succession, secondary. And what were these guys at the beginning. They were your pioneer species. These are the things that come in first, right? And then,
They're both primary succession.
yes, they're just, this one shows the more verbiage. Yeah. Yeah, just different examples of the same basic concept. So keep in mind that over time you have succession. What's a keystone species?
Just if it goes, everything goes.
Right. What was the example I gave you? The beaver under the little keystone arch, right? Remember little beaver, you know, sitting there looking like a beaver, right? Like they do. All right. Remember, I don't know, why would I just mention keystone species while I'm mentioning pioneer species? I don't know, maybe really read your true or false questions carefully, right? Okay, all right, there you go.
I think I'm gonna read my true or false questions carefully.
Yes.
For this midterm.
Yes, I think you are. Cladogram. All right, your cladogram, we just went over this. Diagram showing how organisms are related based on shared derived characteristics or derived characters, sometimes simply there. So like, you know, your salamander is related to whatever everybody is related to, but not necessarily related to each other. Yeah, a salamander and a turtle and look, it shows the different things: vertebral columns, jaws, four-legged locomotion, amniotic eggs, hair. Oh, wait till you get to your homework assignment next semester about agnathans. Oh, so much fun. Agnathans. Oh, these you ever seen a lamprey or a hagfish? Oh. Oh, they're so
Are
attractive.
those the ones that tie in knots?
No, they like have these little, they look like something out of a sci-fi movie, but they're
I
legit.
remember
They're pretty
the
cool.
hagfish being able to tie itself in knots
Love
and to
agnathans.
rip the slime
Yeah.
off itself.
I love me some
Slime
agnathans.
people.
All right, here's your analogous and homologous. All right, so I talked to the juniors and they came up with a mnemonic. You can come up with your own mnemonic, but here's your differences. Your analogous structures don't form from a common ancestor. They don't have the same structure, but they serve the same purpose, their function. These are about function, right? And these are about structure or form. Homologous structures, they show evidence of a common ancestor because the internal structure of, you know, your arm, your cat's arm, your pterodactyl limb, whatever, or pentadactyl limb, sorry, what's pterodactyl? I am tired. Apparently, look, very similar inside, right? So I said to them, if you can think of a way to say analogous is about form and homologous is about structure, then you got an AFHS. And Drew came up, what did he come up with? AFHS, all freaking hats suck, is what he said. That's what he said. Yeah. I don't wear hats, so for me, they kind of do, but you know, Cole loves his hats. So when we were talking before, what was it? I was going to relate this to something we talked about earlier, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember homologous now. Now I can't remember what it was. Doesn't matter really, but it was more along the lines of you can. Was it what?
High school.
No, yeah, high school in general is just.
No, HS.
High school. Okay, so AF. Then what would AF be? Analogous function. Yeah, AF. High school. There you go. Mm-hmm. Yes.
I don't want to answer it.
So you may want to make sure you have some examples of these in your brain. Okay. All right. Now, cellular respiration and photosynthesis. You guys did this really, really well. You did really well with this during y'all are great during Jeopardy. So and then that donkey said, oh my gosh, I love ice cream. So sorry. The look was like this. And if y'all were older, I would have said something else, but I didn't. Okay, then. Be sure you can say this in words: carbon dioxide plus water with or in the presence of or through the use of solar energy produce glucose and oxygen. Oxygen and glucose produce carbon dioxide and water and energy in the form of heat. That's what you're gonna want to say.
Chemical energy.
Yes, it's chemical energy, ATP.
I said chemical
And I
energy,
said,
you
yep, what else?
heat.
Well, no, it's chemical energy. Obviously, that's where it's ATP. You were correct there. But I'm fussing. I would give you credit for either.
You
Because
would say
both
they
are
was
correct.
heat, not chemical energy before.
Hmm.
Yeah, she did.
Okay. All right. What was this one again?
King Henry died unusually drinking chocolate milk.
Which is
Kilo, hecto,
deca unit.
Decca records.
There you go. Right. Notice these are the tricky ones, right? Be sure that you know which one. It's easy if you look at them alphabetically and go, oh, A, I.
A before I.
Right. If you're going this direction. Cole, whoever you are, hush. I called Cole Drew earlier and called Drew Kohler. Cole, I'm talking about you. You don't even know it.
He doesn't know Lil Wayne.
Oh my gosh. Nobody cares who Lil Wayne is.
Lil Wayne. You don't know Lil Wayne?
Oh my goodness.
I don't think.
If you want to talk about Rev Run or something,
The Notorious B.I.G.
No, but.
I'll go back earlier than that.
Rappers of the 2000s. Lil Wayne.
Yeah.
You know who Lil Wayne is though.
I know of him. I don't think I've ever even been.
Okay, note here. This is one that's commonly misspelled. I won't count off if you spell it wrong, but note. Then typically when you think of words that sound like Millie, you're going to want to put 2 L's because it's a short I, but it's not. It's fine. So anyway, okay, that one's a memorize. Domain, kingdom, pollen, class, order, family, genus, species. Dopey, deer, dippy, whatever. I need to move her. I left her over there. Now she's yelling at me. Yeah, she's stuck. And see, she'll talk. So she'll just leave her because she'll shut up if you leave her. All right, we're good there. Yeah. Oh, because it gets stuck under furniture.
Oh, I thought it was Ozzy's fault.
No, that would actually be fun. So anyway, memorize this one. Now, this is one, when I tell you memorize forever, this is one worth memorizing forever. This is something educated people understand.
Do you know what phylum stands for? It comes
Phylum.
From
Greek, right?
It comes from the Greek word phylum, and it means race.
Oh, I didn't realize that. That's interesting. I heard a really interesting one last night too. What was it? Now I can't remember. Oh, it was about Israel. Israel means wrestling with God.
Yeah, because that's actually.
Because it goes back to the, I didn't realize it was wrestling with. I thought there was some other verb in there. That was fascinating. Anyway, you may see something like, oh, what's this?
You know, Jesus is like a English version of a Latin root, of a Greek root, of a Hebrew root.
Because we're going back to Yeshua or whatever. Yeshua to Joshua to whatever. Yeah, again. So, I saw one the other day. It said, what did it say? Delta and Omicron and something else. Delta and Omicron was an anagram for don't trust the media. It was hilarious. Anyway, so anyway, this is the kind of thing you may want to look at. Oh, look, there are things missing. If you know what they all are, then you'll have no problem filling them in. All right, this one. So a relationship between organisms that strive for the same resources in the same place.
Competition.
Okay, and a relationship in which one species benefits while others not affected.
Commensalism.
Okay, and who's calling me? It even says telemarketer. Like I would answer that ever. A relationship in which one species benefits while the other is harmed. Right? In a relationship, both species benefit.
Mutualism or symbiosis.
Yeah, mutual. Well, they're all except the bottom one are technically symbiosis. They all fall under that umbrella. But this is specifically mutualism. And then this one is what?
Predation.
Predation, right? Okay. You might not have to worry about how to spell them all because it might be a matching question. All right, so here are your 4 domains that fall into eukarya because we took Monera out. Yeah, we took Monera out, so we don't have 5 kingdoms. We have 4 kingdoms because now Monera's out in a different domain. So now we have, what are they?
Protista, fungi, plantae, animalia.
Animalia. Protista, fungi, or fungi. You can do it either way. Plantae and animalia. Correct. Yep. Fungi, fungi. Woo! There's always the jokes. There's one next semester, next quarter when we get to fungi. You can guess what the Rico is going to be. Is Rico such a fun guy? Anyway. So what about this one? What's very hot with rare rainfall?
Desert.
Okay, and what's hot with rainfall only in rainy seasons?
Savannah.
And how about changing seasons with good precipitation year round?
Deciduous.
What's a colder climate with precipitation?
Boreal.
Very year round, boreal forest. And how about very hot with daily rainfall? Tropical rainforest. And how about where you get your permafrost?
Taiga.
Yeah, taiga. Well, that's tundra.
Yeah.
Taiga and boreal forest are about the same. There's just sort of
Boreal
different
forest
language.
is perfection.
Yeah. Tundra is what you want anytime you think about permafrost. So this one right here, weather day to day, climate conditions over time. This is one of those definitely commit to memory the rest of your life. And whenever you see this one, climate conditions over time, think back to that 24-hour clock business we were talking about with just life on Earth, and realize that we had from midnight to 4 a.m. before we even got to life. That's time. So when you're talking about conditions over time, of course, time is relative. How much time are we talking about? But when you talk about 200 years or whatever, since we've been recording things, it's like blink faster than the blink of an eye, nanoseconds.
Climate is what you expect, weather is what you get.
That's a good one. All right, who can do this one to me? There are 3 big points. This is again every test you ever get from me. So most of you have it memorized if you've been here before.
I never memorized.
Let's sacrifice.
Okay. What can we do?
Science is always changing, that's one.
There's one.
The point is to narrow uncertainty, not to get a final
That's a
answer.
big one.
And then the other one that doesn't always
Is
make
that
sense.
the one where it presumes binary state?
That's kind of the first one.
No, it's like, it's not the point of
binary
that
state
science.
once you get-
Yes,
The
it's
point- the
about
point of-
understanding in one area, right?
Wait, if it's formal science, is it informal science?
Well, no,
What's the-
natural
what's the-
science.
Natural science.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
your
natural
first
science
one is
not-
that science doesn't exist in a binary state. There's no imaginary line that you cross and go, I don't know, oh, I know, right? That doesn't exist. If there's no binary state, and that binary stuff is for your formal sciences. That's your math and statistics. Science is more about processes and narrowing uncertainty, right? The other one is that understanding in one area of science that's really good doesn't mean that your understanding in another area of science, it doesn't negate your level. So like Linnaeus knew that if you took an apple and you dropped it, it was going to fall to earth every time you did it, right? That didn't change. We still know that, but we've changed the way we categorize things because we've learned more over time. All right. So your 3 big ones are the binary state thing doesn't exist. Science is never 100% settled, and presumes poor understanding in one area invalidates good understanding in another. This is the one you're hearing now on the media all the time, by the way. They said don't wear masks. They said wear masks. Now they don't, because we're still learning. Just because we understand one thing really well doesn't mean that we don't, or we missed something. We don't understand this well, therefore we don't understand any of it. Not true, right? This one's, I swear, on the news every day, there's a new one with that. And then a natural science is about narrowing uncertainty. If you put the words narrowing uncertainty, they are italicized for a reason. You put that down, you're almost certain to get full credit for that question, as long as you give me some idea of the other one. That's the big one. That's the big one. All right.
Wait, do you need to write all 3? I've always just written one.
Whatever you write, if it's full enough, you're good. But if you write all 3, you're even better off. So why are traits controlled by X? We went over this, right? With the what?
Do you get extra credit if you write all 3?
No, but you're less likely to lose any points. So, and there's the thing, like some of you are with me in your first year. Some of you have been here 4 years. I know who you are. So when I'm grading your tests, I know how I'm grading you.
Don't grade as harsh. No, that's okay.
says the napping boy. All right, so
I had finals yesterday.
yeah.
10 questions and I got 10
All
right.
All right, so it's almost Jackie's time, so we got to wrap up real quick. So traits controlled on alleles on the X chromosomes. Remember that if you've got a recessive trait on your X chromosome, you may not have another gene on your Y chromosome to cover that. So you're going to have expression of the recessive allele in more cases than you otherwise would. And be sure you know some examples of sex-linked traits or disorders. The most obvious one is the color blindness one, because we all did the thing with the, can you see this? I had Anthony going, there's a number? It was great. Like, you might want to go home and do a couple more of these, man. It was funny. Oh, wait, you may have to know this. You may have to know this one, right?
I just completely missed this question.
And that's, yeah. So
Does ER stand for something rather than?
endoplasmic reticulum. rough endoplasmic reticulum, smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Yep. And you know, we did that one was Final Jeopardy. So you may have to know that one too. And you know this, you guys are good because we just did this. If you study everything here and everything in the Jeopardy, you'll be fine. Just be sure the big concepts, like the overarching ones, like where you talk about, I don't know, maybe Punnett squares and how genotypes and phenotypes play out, that kind of thing. You might really want to be sure you understand, right? Right. Okay, you're good. It is Jackie's turn.